Hey y'all, welcome to What Could Go Wrong Live. I'm hanging out today with Sam Holston, co-founder of BrainTools, and you pretty much share brain science and write copy, as I hear.
Yeah, that's pretty much my MO. I try to share brain science and copy. It's an interesting pair. I try to share practical brain science in ways everyone can use, and looking at ways to integrate that into education and sharing that through both our podcasts and some other things we're working on too.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I connected with you on LinkedIn because I'm scrolling through, just kind of skipping past all the uninteresting things, and then like your
Yeah.
thing will pop up, and I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. And so I love the take that you have on, when you're writing and like the little tidbits you throw in there, like it's totally normal. And
You
I'm
got
a
to.
little obsessed with brain science anyway, so
I think everyone secretly is, right? What I've discovered is
totally.
everyone is totally a little bit obsessed with brain science, but equally they find it a little bit intimidating, which I can totally empathize with because if you've ever read some of the neuroscience-based papers in peer-reviewed journals, oh my God,
Uh-huh.
it's so
Yeah,
overwhelming.
it really is. It's scary. So I can agree. I can say that because I think you're right. I think there's so many people that are secretly interested in brain science, but then if you say you're interested in it and then someone starts a conversation with you about it and you don't know enough, you're just like,
Oh
So
yeah.
I love the way that you represent it. It's kind of like simpler than we all think it should be.
Well, I think that's like for me, it's humanizing it and making it less scary
Yeah.
and less sciencey. Because everyone has a brain, everyone should know how it works, kind of, and how to use it. But we're never really taught that. We're never really
Right.
taught that.
That's so true. That's so true. And I agree, and humanizing brain science, I talk about a lot, like humanized education, humanized relationship
Yeah.
workforce, right? Bring everything back down to that more simplistic level. So tell us about what you do, who you are. My introduction was like this long. So go ahead and fill in all the blanks.
Yeah, no, no worries. I can do that. So I host a podcast called Brain Tools, and the whole point of the whole thing is just to share practical brain science based on topics. So, for example, we've just been recording a couple episodes on brains at work, on things like productivity, on resilience, grit, managing your emotions, stress, and then talking through how that works from a neuroscience lens. But then also the big thing we do is we give brain tools. That's why we call it brain tools.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
we give practical brain
yeah.
tools every
Shocking.
episode. Yeah, I know, shocking. Makes so much sense. And then on top of that, I work for a couple of clients freelance doing copywriting, and I find that brain science helps with that too, to better understand and empathize with people. So that's kind of my day job. Um, and then I put out content on LinkedIn and soon to be some other channels too. So that's who I am. That's what I do. Hmm.
Uh-oh.
Oh no,
Oh, there you are. Your face stopped moving.
I'm
Oh, there we
there.
go. I think that's really cool. I love all that kind of practical advice that you give and how you relate it to different things. Like, how did
Hmm.
you get into that? How did that start for you?
That's such a good question. So I was 15, Chelsea. I was 15 when it
Yeah.
started. Yeah. So I had this class in high school, right? And maybe it's different over in the States, but I had this class in high school where we could choose whatever thesis we wanted to write. So like
Okay.
I got a whole semester, 2 terms to write this thesis, and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to write, and I was stressing out about it. And then I had one of my classes was like a personal development class, my teacher Tim, and Tim looked at us in the middle of the class and said, "Hey, what do you think the internet's doing to your brain?" I kind of stepped back and said to myself, "Holy shit, I don't know, but something's going on
Good
there."
question.
It's a great question. That's a great question, Tim. I think I might think about that. So I ended up writing this 10,000 word thesis on neuroplasticity and how the brain is being rewired by our use of the internet when I was 15.
Hmm.
And from then onwards, I was just obsessed. Like anytime I was studying something in university, my first trick would be to go to Google and say, how do I improve focus with neuroscience? Or how do I learn better with
Yeah.
neuroscience? That's like my little
Yeah.
Google hack for anyone out there. If you want to try to figure something out, just add neuroscience, Google it. You'll find something interesting.
That's some perfect
Um,
advice. We're done, right? We can just shut the
yeah,
show
we're done.
down. Like we
You
did
don't
it.
even need to
That's
listen to my
everything.
stuff. Just go add neuroscience onto your query in Google. Type that up. That's all done. Um, and so I kind of went away from it for a little while, a couple of years during university. I actually ended up studying finance and economics, which I hated. And now I'm about to pursue my master's in cognitive neuroscience. I'm just waiting for that to kick off.
I love that. My background is child development, and we did some of those things on like how does the child develop? There we go. The whole child, right? What does it teach to?
Yeah.
What does it look like to teach to the whole brain, instead of just one side or the other, and those types of things. And it was my introduction to that concept that I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And if you start taking those pieces and putting them into how we're planning lessons, engaging with students, then everything changes, right? You throw that neuroscience on the end and everything's a change every time.
100%. It's almost as if like teachers would benefit so much from just some introductory neuroscience. Like this is how we learn. This is how kids learn. This is how they develop. Like you said, it suddenly makes everything contextually make sense from a learning development perspective, from an education perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like educators, we're always learning how to assess, how to test, how to teach, but we're never given kind of that focus on why we're doing that and how what we're doing is impacting them or how they're able to learn that information. So much of the focus is on assessing what we teach rather than why are we teaching that way, and is the way that we're teaching, the best way to teach to it's a way that they can really comprehend what you're saying or retain that information.
Absolutely. Like there's not a lot of thought put into the way that information is delivered in the way the brain wants to absorb it, right? So for example, we know that learning is what's called a somatosensory, sorry, it's a terrible word, experience. And basically what that means is like when you're learning something, you're actually taking in all the context in your environment, all the sensory inputs, everything you see, hear, touch, feel, and everything you experience into that learning experience. But then you think about learning and so often teacher-led learning that we've been taught to run, and it's a teacher talking at students to the front of a room, which from a sensory experience is just audio. It's just a bit of sound. Yeah. And then we wonder why that's not the most effective way for kids to learn when really they're not getting that full range of senses so necessary for learning concepts. But teachers are not taught that going through college, going through their college degrees. So it's not their fault. It's systemic issues.
Yeah. So if you were to design like the optimal learning environment, right? Yeah. What would that look like?
I love that question because I've thought about it about a million times. So if I was to design it, I think I'd have like a 90-minute period in the morning where kids sat down to do just like really intense focus on skills. So that would be repetition of skill sets, whether that's their writing, their speaking, basic mathematical skills, whatever it is, just to ingrain in the brain, because repetition is incredibly important for myelination and wiring that skill. And then for the rest of the day, I'm talking for the next afternoon, it would just be all projects and team-based work. Because as soon as you give kids or you give people agency to control what they do, they're much more invested and engaged, which means they're going to be emotionally aroused. And then that plays a massive impact in the way we integrate information, in the way we encode it and store it, because your emotional processing is actually right next to where your memory is processed. The hippocampus and the amygdala are right next to each other, so they tie in together. And then the other thing is, I think like what I would be doing in a perfect learning environment is I'd be asking kids to produce things every week. I'd say produce a presentation this week, or create a video this week, or you're gonna produce something interesting from what you learn. And the reason for that is a principle called the generation effect. Have you heard of the generation effect?
No. Oh my gosh, tell me.
No. Okay. This applies to anyone. Like if you're in a workplace, this works for you. If you're at school, this works for you. If you're a teacher, this works for you. The generation effect basically states that when we generate new information, for example, when we take what we've just learned and we create a piece of content, or if we create a video, or we create a presentation for our team, the generation of that new information actually makes it stick in our brain much better, improves recall. And this has been proved over thousands of studies. And the reason is because when you generate that new information, when you make that piece of content, your brain is working so much harder to process what you've just learned, to recall it and bring it back to the top of mind from your longer term memory or medium term memory, and to make sense of it all so you can explain it to another person. So we could easily use that as teachers by just having kids produce something creative and new every week, which would A, be engaging for them, but B, is now leveraging this generation effect so that whatever they're learning is sticking in their brains better. And it's the simple way of, you know how people say, if you want to know something, teach something? Well, this is that principle
Right.
in
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it's so simple in concept, right? I mean, we experience it all the time. Is rote memorization versus active presentation are two very different things. And you'll learn very
100%.
differently in those things. But we see so much rote memorization being required and implemented inside of traditional school systems and less of this concept. And I feel like the concept that you're talking of is highly embedded in like a project-based learning environment. More so than a traditional learning environment where they're just throwing facts at you, expecting you to remember them and then spit them back out on a test.
Yeah. Right?
I don't know about you, but I remembered it for like this long, just long enough to like fill in all the blanks on the test and then don't ask me again because I have no idea what you're talking about. It's gone.
Yeah. It's like studying for college exams that week beforehand, cramming it all in, then the week after.
Right? Yeah.
Completely erased.
It's gone.
It's all gone.
Yeah, don't ask me to do that again.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you some of the things I learned in university and college because they're gone. They're out of my brain. But it's super interesting. If you look at some of the Scandinavian systems, the school systems over there, they use a lot of project-based learning. It's a big part of what they do. And yet their test results are amazing.
Shocking. I know. They're teaching the whole brain. So we used at the school I was directing most recently, we use a Reggio Emilia pedagogy. And so that was kind of our approach. We're not telling the child what we're asking them to produce. Rather, we're giving them the materials and an idea, and then they get to produce what that looks like. And so when you start implementing that inside of early childhood, because these kids that are used to traditional preschools are like, okay, tell me what I'm making. You know, I'm supposed to make mine look just like the teachers or just like this. And we're like, no, here's the materials, ready, set, go. And many times they're like, what? Which is so sad because at 4, they should be ready to just change the world with whatever they're ready to create. But it made me think like how often we're not given that blank slate to create. We're always just given, here's what I want you to replicate, or here's what I want you to remember and then spit out again. And so I wonder, like, I wonder what the value or the difference we would see in students if they were given this blank slate instead of this rubric to fill.
I would like heaps. I love this Ken Robinson quote, and RIP Ken, because you're a legend, which was, we're educating kids out of creativity. Which ties directly into what you're saying, right? Whereas if I think the problem is in the way we have this grade system and this standardization, like you say, and this is how you should do things, creates this punishment or this reward versus non-reward feedback loops. So kids feel like they're obligated to do everything's the right way, or they become punished, and that punishment is in the form of a D- or an F or whatever it is, right? And what it actually does is establishes this pattern, this brain, this schema that says I have to do things exactly the way I'm told, or it's not right. And that's going to be really bad for me socially, but also for my brain and the repercussions in the way I feel. So if we gave kids like an open slate, I think what you'd see is kids coming out the back end of school systems just 10 times more creative. I mean, the creativity is there, it's just stifled. And it's interesting. I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you've asked kids to think about, especially younger kids who are not yet fully indoctrinated into that high school thinking and that the rigidness in the way they think about getting things right. You ask kids who are like 10, 11, 12, who still have a bit of flexibility to solve problems, they come up with some crazy shit. Like
the coolest shit.
Right. Because they're just totally uninhibited. They're not worried about getting it wrong. But then as soon as they're worried about getting it wrong because it's got ramifications for their marks, well, then you're inhibiting their creativity.
Yeah. And that's just the worst. I mean, I saw it happen with my own. So my youngest went through school with me. So I pretty much, when I was working in early education, then I knew that she was going to need something a little bit different. Turns out she has dyslexia and ADHD and just learns completely different. But knowing that she was going to need something as she got older, I built a kindergarten so she could go to kindergarten. And then I built a first grade so she could go to first grade. And then I was like, dang, I'm running out of rooms to keep building grades for this child. Like, what am I going to do? And so there was an alternative model school in the area. And then we sent her there. And it was a university model and the kind of the closest I could get to what I could create, you know, in a school environment. And she did well. And then she went to another alternative model school. And here they started doing grades. And she had never heard of a grade in her life. Like she had no idea what that meant, what you were saying, because we never did that. She was in second grade by this point. Maybe going into third grade. And so her teacher at the time came back to her and said, if you don't complete this, then you're going to get a bad grade. And Alea was like, I'm sorry, what are you saying? Like, I'm going to get a what now? What is it that you're talking about? And that right there was like my little like gold star for my parenting badge, right? My third grader doesn't know what a grade is. And that just makes me so happy because she was learning for the sake of learning, not for the sake of whatever that meant. And that changed her whole experience.
Oh my God, that resonates with me so much. I'll tell you a little bit of a story that my mom tells me all the time because my mom's an educator too, like pre-primary. And she sent me to a kindergarten where they were the same thing, basically no rights or wrongs, no grades, there's no punitives, it's just do what you want and you know, creatively learn. And so I get to school with this mindset and this thinking. And first day one, prep. I'm this little 6-year-old kid. The teacher says, all right, here's a Humpty Dumpty. You've got to color in and fill out your Humpty Dumpty. All the class do that. And so the class gets all their Humpty Dumptys and I get mine and I do my thing. And at the end of the day, the teacher calls my mom and goes, Kerry, there's a problem with your son. She says, what? I said, well, when the class was filling out their Humpty Dumptys, he just turned it over and drew his own. And she's like, yeah, he's not used to people telling him what to do. This little 6-year-old drew this ugly Humpty Dumpty on the back.
I like it. I mean, right? Like, why are we... So we had a big thing that we talked about when I was training educators, was this whole process over product concept, right? And so when I first went into the school I was at most recently, teachers were teaching in a way where if the student teachers would create the bee and set it out as the example, and then they would like step by step walk each child through the creation of this bee to look exactly like this bee that they created. So if the child put like one of the stripes on crooked, the teacher would be like, oh, no, we got to put it straight, put the bee and like this. And so they'd all come out looking the same. And when I went in and I was like, okay, guys, let me just tell you, we are no longer going to do the child's art projects for them. And it was like, what are you saying? What are you talking about? I don't understand. I'm like, no, it's about the process of creating this product, not about the product that you get at the end. And this was a shift in mindset, because then it went from we have to make sure that all the children create this bee and it looks a certain way so that when it goes home, their parents believe that they did something of value and we can prove that we all made a bee today. And instead of that focus, it was, what is the child's experience during this? How are they talking? What is their sensory? How is their engagement? What's their relationship look like? And just shifting from we need this product to what is the process of how we're engaging the whole brain child in this activity. What is the activity being used as a container for the relationship rather than just we need to create this product? And I think if that mindset were more widely encouraged inside of traditional schooling, we could get a lot further.
Totally right. It's now about learning rather than about teaching.
Right.
Which is a big problem. And we know from the research that so much of learning is curiosity driven. It's dopamine driven. Like if you learn at if you look at the epicenters of the brain, which have the most receptors for dopamine, which is the motivation molecule, not a reward molecule. Anyone out there who thinks that, go have a look at some of the new research. But this motivation molecule, dopamine, is the receptors most, the densest region of receptors is in your hippocampus, which is where you process short-term memories and then consolidate those to long-term memories. So we know that actually learning is incredibly motivating and pleasurable when people have control over it, when they have access to decide how they learn. Because the other thing that a lot of teachers don't know, and a lot of people don't know this, and listen up if like you're in a workplace, most people don't know this, but agency, our sense of control of a situation, is inversely proportional to our stress response. So when we think we don't have control, we actually have more stress. When we think we're in control, we feel less stress. Everyone knows this, right? If you can't control a situation, say you're a backseat driver and someone's driving erratically in the front, you feel like you're freaking the fuck out, straight up, because you're not
So
controlling
true.
the car.
Yeah.
Or planes. You know, if you were flying the plane, you'd probably feel super mellow because you're the one behind the steering wheel or the
Right,
joysticks.
right.
I don't know. I'm not a pilot. I've got no idea how it works.
I feel like there's a steering wheel like in there. I've seen it in a movie. That little half
I don't
steering
know.
wheel, you know?
I feel like these days they just have a screen and press a couple buttons and kick back.
Yeah.
Probably. But it's so crazy, and it totally touches on your point that when you give kids agency to make mistakes, but also to control their direction and do what they want, they're going to be less stressed because they feel less pressure from you. There's less of that stress response relating to their choice of control, but it's just more rewarding.
Yeah. You know, and I saw something posted today. It was shared by a friend of mine, and I believe it was an article that was shared somewhere, and I didn't dig into it. I just kind of read what he wrote, but it was essentially saying that research is now showing that teenagers, the biggest issue that teenagers are facing is not social isolation, which is what everybody was kind of assuming. The people that are having the kids are experiencing these hard things because they're in such isolation, but rather it is to be found that it was the like the pressures, a pressure for achievement and more achievement and more achievement and more achievement and more achievement is really what's causing these negative symptoms inside of teenagers, which kind of speaks to what I think you were saying, right? Is they're feeling that they're having to achieve to other people's standards. Because I wonder how that would be different. If they were achieving to their own standards they were setting for themselves, would they still be experiencing the same level of stress and anxiety?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is no. There's no way they would be, right? Because so much of that pressure, it's not social isolation pressure, but it's social conformity pressure in the form of grades and marks. And we know from the research, adolescents in particular are incredibly susceptible to their position socially and how they're influenced by the environment. It's what we value as we're growing up, teenage brains. And that actually reflects itself in that mark situation, because if everyone around you, your parents, your friends, your teachers are telling you have to get good marks, damn, that feels like a lot of weight. Like that's a lot of pressure. Whereas if you're saying, oh, I want to get good marks for myself because I want to do that, well, something that's empowering. That's a motivational statement. So there's a massive paradigm shift there.
I agree. So my oldest goes to a international kind of school, if you can call it. I refer to it more of as a learning community called Galileo, and the students, it's pretty much student led. And they have so much autonomy. So she has to set her goals for the beginning of the month. She has to make sure that she meets them. She has a check-in, and she can set them whatever they want them to be. And so this month, one of her goals was to create a Minecraft mod pack specific to each family member. So she came and interviewed me last night. Like, awesome. What do you like? What do you don't like? Here's why. Okay, I'm going to create this mod pack. These are the things. And right. So every family member is going to get a mod pack. And the cool thing about that is she's creating a product like you were talking about, and she's engaging in it in her own way. So she's working on interview skills and, filtering information and then research for figuring out how these mod packs are and whatever. And then she's creating it. And none of that was driven by me. She just came to me and said, I need to do this project. What do you think? Or just like, here, I'm going to interview you. And I'm like, great, I'm in, let's do it. And she's 11. Awesome. And I think that's a beautiful picture of really, if you do give them this autonomy, let them steer this wheel or half wheel or steering wheel, whatever we decided was actually in an airplane, they really can follow that curiosity to something cool. Even if we're not standing in front of them saying, you have to do this.
Totally. Like, give the kids a say in what they learn. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? But we don't do this with adults either. Yeah. Like, you think about most corporate learning situations, I'm drawing a bit of an analog here, but like most corporate learning situations is an L&D department saying, hey, everyone's going to learn this. Here's the programs. Here's the solutions we're going to buy, or the technology. And then you've got, the people out in the field or behind the desk going, I don't want to learn this shit. Like, this is useless. Why didn't anyone ask me?
We don't need that.
We don't need that. I think the problem is, and it's really hard for people to do, that so much of the design of education and the delivery of content and choosing what kids learn or what adults learn is done by not by them, but other people who think they know what that should be. And they're rarely consulted in that process.
And they rarely know. And that's so true. So like one of the things that, I harp on a lot, one of my soapboxes is this concept of co-constructivism, and like laying aside the ego of the educator. So I don't want to stand in front of a child and say, here are the things you need to learn, here's why, and then do what I say, or, you won't learn what you're supposed to do. Rather, come alongside the child and say, okay, what do you want to learn? How are we going to get to that place? What does that look like? And we're going to build it together rather than I'm going to make you do this. So I actually had, both my girls are homeschooled, more of an unschool situation, honestly. But I had someone ask me this morning, like, how do you do that? If I had to teach my own children, they would kill me or I would kill them. Like something bad would happen if we had to hang out together. And I was like, it's not what you think it is. It's not where I stand in front of them and say, you have to do these 10 things. I'm going to tell you how to do it, produce or die, right? I'm saying, here's what do you want to accomplish this week? How do we get to that place? What do you think about that? How can I help you find that place? So it's not a listen to me or don't. They get to choose kind of what they learn. And I feel like it takes away so much of that tension between them and I, because there is no failure, as it were, because they can produce what they want to produce.
Right. And there's also like ownership. They get to control
Yeah.
it. Have you heard of the IKEA effect?
Did you say IKEA?
Yeah, the IKEA effect. I did say IKEA effect. It'll make total sense. This is one of those crazy
Okay,
psychology
no.
things. So you know how people buy IKEA furniture and often it's just like total junk, like trash. The makeup's terrible, yet they still value it. Why? And the reason is, it turns out we value more. If you look at the research, we value more the things that we have a hand in creating and making. It's why when people get customized notebooks, even though they're just a notebook, we treasure them, right? Or if you get a customized mug, or if you make something yourself, you value it more than you would if someone else did. And actually
Yeah.
applies just as well to learning. If you're
Yeah.
designing your own learning, you're gonna value it more because you had a hand in creating it. So the IKEA
Yeah.
effect works for learning.
Who knew? Like so much. Now we know that we add neuroscience to the end of all of our search terms. And now we
Yep.
know what the IKEA effect is. Like my day's already better.
I'm telling you, the neuroscience thing on Google, game changer. Like you won't look at the world again the same way. I'm sorry. You're welcome, and I'm sorry.
Oh dear. So I think what we've seen with you writing copy is you use a lot of this neuroscience like hacks. Like you hack into our brain when you talk to us, right? Because you know how to talk to us and get us to buy into what you're saying, or the things that you do with this ghostwriting. So tell me about that. I think it's so interesting what you do and how you do it.
Yeah. And so there's like, I wish there was a buy button in the brain that neuroscience just unveiled. Like everyone's like, oh, you must know how to make people do things. And I think to myself, no, like, have you ever tried making someone do things? Like they hate you. Like they push back on you.
Yeah,
There's
totally.
actually
Yeah.
you would probably know this, right? If you tell your kids to do something, they turn around and say, no, there's no way I'm doing that. But if they want to do it themselves, suddenly they're motivated. And that's actually called
You got to make them
reactive
think it's their
enforcement.
idea.
It's got to be their idea. It's always got to be their idea. So, I mean, you can't really hack the brain just with this. There's no like magical phrase, right? There's no silver bullet where you just do these three things and people buy stuff. And I wish it would make my job very easy. But what I'm finding more and more, yeah, if it was possible. What I'm finding more and more though is like as much as I'm learning about neuroscience and the way the brains work and how that feeds into copy, is that it kind of just mimics what a lot of people who are good at writing copy or good at marketing or good at connecting people already know, which is emotions are super important. Connecting with people through your words is everything. Building trust is really, really important before you try to sell anything or pitch value. And the most important thing to do when you're writing is help people envision a future. And in neuroscience, they call that self-value integration. And there's certain parts of the brain responsible for kind of predicting and projecting what the future is going to look at. And we know from the research when those are active, persuasion effectively happens. So it's really just helping people imagine a future with whatever you're trying to sell, which is not really that manipulative. It's not like I'm putting in these little things on the screen or like these 3 magic words that sell.
I know you are. I know it's in there somewhere. I can just feel it. I'm reading your copy wish. Oh, he's doing something.
I wish.
But I mean, there's so many of those things that are kind of innate to us. Like you talked about earlier, the emotions are next to us being able to remember things. I feel like that's what you said, and I could be completely wrong. But
no, you're on point.
Is that what you said?
Yes. Yeah, you're on point. Okay. One of the bigger processes of emotion, the amygdala, lives right next to the hippocampus, which is where memories are encoded and processed initially.
Yeah. And so what we talk about a lot in education when we're working with learners is the first thing and the foundation to everything that we're going to do is relationship. We have to create a safe space for the learner, a trauma-informed space, a space where they're valued, where they're heard, where they have a sense of belonging. And then if that's the foundation that you're working from, anything, academic or whatever that happens on top of that is bonus because you're already, creating this space for them where anything can happen. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about emotions and memory being close to each other. It's just that if they have a space like that, think of the learning that could take place, not just this rote memorization, but long-term ability to learn and then use and produce whatever they want to produce.
Right. Like totally makes sense. We all I know it's a bit of a common diatribe thrown around, but the idea of psychological safety actually makes a lot of sense when it comes to neuroscience.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense because what we know is when people feel unsafe, kids or, the people writing your words, when they feel attacked or in a situation when they're under pressure, you're going to be start triggering their stress response, the autonomic arousal. So things like cortisol, epinephrine flood the body, preparing you to move in case something dangerous happens. People call it fight or flight, but it's actually flight or rest. Sorry, flight, flight, or freeze is the response in the brain. And when this happens in an educational setting or in a copy setting, basically the parts of your brain responsible for integrating and processing new information shut down. Like they physically shrink in response to that stress in the brain. So the hippocampus, it shrinks. The prefrontal cortex, which is what does all your planning, executive function, attention, also shrinks to protect itself from stress. Whereas at the same time, your salience network, the amygdala, insula, and other related areas that are responsible for processing attention and anxiety and stress and emotion, they grow. So when people don't feel safe in classroom, they're actually really bad at taking in new information, and instead they're just on hyper alert.
Yeah. I mean, it seems so simple, and I wonder, especially right now, one of the big conversations is testing, right? We have standardized testing coming up, especially in the States. Are we going to test? Are we going to hold it off because of COVID? All of these things around that. And there's already a lot of stress around testing for most students. I mean, I know that I hear of these like magical unicorn students who love testing and are really great at it and look forward to it. They live somewhere in another universe. I've never met them. I was not one of them, but I hear that they exist, right? So I wonder how many of these students, like, what does it actually look like inside of their brain when they're walking into a testing environment with this fear or, pressure, all those types of things? And how does that change their performance? And based on what you're saying, it doesn't do anything good for them.
Most kids, it doesn't. But for those unicorn kids, can I tell you something interesting? Can I share a bit of a secret?
Are you a unicorn?
No, I wasn't a unicorn. I don't know many unicorns. I've never met one. I've only heard about the companies. But for those people, right, and it also extends to outside of testing as well, but other environments. For the unicorns amongst us, it's purely in the way they interpret and look at a situation, because anxiety and stress is actually just excitement, but it's in a different frame. So, the unicorns go into a test and they're excited rather than feeling anxious, because the neurochemicals and neurotransmitters for excitement, lo and behold, are pretty much exactly the same ones you have for stress and anxiety. They're just interpreted by the body different or the brain different. So it's still adrenaline, it's still cortisol. Whereas excitement, the way you frame it is, oh my God, I'm feeling these butterflies because I'm so excited to do this test because I'm going to kill it. Whereas the people with anxiety saying, oh my God, I feel these jitters because I'm going to fail this test.
That was me.
Yeah, right? Put your hand up for that. But it's super interesting when you look at excitation and anxiety, that they pretty much operate on really, really similar bases, but it's just how people interpret them in their body and their brain that determines the impact they have on them.
That's crazy. So how do I fix that?
Hey, if I knew that, I'd be a millionaire. Okay. That's
Seriously, can you work on that, please? Because that would be great.
Yeah. Hang on. Let me just. I'll just get down to that.
Write that down. And when you figure that out, just know that we decided it here, and I should be the first to experience the change, like the situation where we take anxiety and turn it into excitement. That'd be great.
I'll give you credit. Like maybe like a little clip of the ticket or whatever it is.
Chelsea
did this.
Right. That's fine.
One thing you can do if you want a tool, because I'm the BrainTools guy. I should be giving BrainTools.
Yeah, right. Where's the tool?
The tool is called cognitive reframing. Have you heard of cognitive reframing before? Basically,
I've heard of it. Tell me.
Yeah, you go into that testing situation or whatever stressful situation, and you flip the script internally. So as you're going into a test, rather than being like, oh my God, I'm so nervous for this test, I'm going to fail, you just tell yourself and convince yourself, oh my God, I'm so excited for this test to get it done. And the more you do this, the more you wire the associations and the neural connections in your brain, you myelinate those pathways. So you get better and better at doing this. So for example, I used to be really, really terrified of sales calls when I did sales a while ago. And I would tell myself, oh my God, this is going to be a nightmare. And then I just started telling myself, oh my God, this is going to be so fun. Imagine the crazy things I'm going to say in this call. What do you know? Suddenly they were fun.
I mean, you're kind of explaining like the context behind what could go wrong, right? Because it's kind of like, things are going to be ridiculous. I'm going to say ridiculous things. Things are definitely going to go wrong, but it's totally fine. Like, what could go wrong? It's going to be great. And perspective really is everything, right? And I love that there's a fancy word for that, because what could go wrong is essentially creating a place for cognitive reframing. And I know science. I feel like that's what you just said to me just now.
Yeah. Get the PhD on the wall. I'll write it out for you.
Right? I need it like right here.
Yeah. So Matthew Whelan just dropped that in with public speaking was using cognitive reframing. Totally. You just turn nervousness or anxiety into excitement and excitation.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of falls in line with self-talk, right? How are you talking to yourself, and what are you feeding your own brain? Because I have been known to not speak kindly to myself. And, the people are come back and saying, like, would you say that to a child, to your child? Or, well, no, then why would you say that to yourself? And so I think, that's kind of cognitive reframing in my mind is, what are you saying to yourself about it? And is it really going to be awful? Or are you going to go into it like, what could go wrong mindset? It's going to be fun. There's no bad experiences, just experiences, right?
Ooh, I like that. So Dr. What Could Go Wrong? I love that. That should be your name, Chel.
Right? I mean, come on.
When it comes to self-talk, I'm going to give you the best brain hack I've found for myself and anyone I've talked to is say it out loud. Because if you say all those terrible things you're thinking out loud, suddenly you say them and you go, oh my God, that is disgusting. Like you're able to externalize it and separate it from your brain. And just by putting it into words, like putting it into language, you see it much more clearly than when you let it just reverberate around your brain and in your head. Have you ever done that before?
No, because someone might hear me.
Yeah, I mean, you say it to yourself like, quietly.
Oh, I just talk to myself. I totally do that.
Yeah, or you can write it out. I mean, I think writing out is really good too. Yeah, if you write it out, you look at it, and it's confronting.
Yeah, it really is. I had to do something like that with one of my coaches, where I had to kind of like all of the thoughts that went through my head during the day that were negative or like attacking to myself, I had to write them down in this little journal and then showing them to her next time I met with her. And I remember looking at after like the first day, like, I am not showing her this. I'm going to make up a fake journal, and this is my real journal, and I'm going to not show her that, because it really is, when you have to read it back, you're like, wow, I don't want to hang out with me either.
Yeah, I'm a bad person to myself.
I'm a terrible human to myself, but everybody else seems to have a great time with me, but I am not a great human. So what would be your brain tool for, like, how can we implement some of this cognitive reframing into education and classroom and teacher-student relationships?
That's a really good question. I think it starts with like teachers teaching kids at the start of lessons or during test periods, cognitive reframes for the situations. So for example, you're going into the exams period, and teachers at the start of every class of repeating, because repetition is incredibly important for memory. It's how we wire new pathways in our brain. They're telling the kids, hey, remember when your exam's coming up, you're going to feel butterflies. You're going to feel your body, your muscles contracting, and your whole system getting ready to move. And remember, that's just you being excited for the exam. That's being excited. Yeah. That's not nervousness, that's anxiety. That's being excited. And the more you tell kids that over and over again throughout the course of the year around the exams, the more they'll integrate that thinking into their brain. And they'll get to the exam and be like, oh, damn, I'm so excited for this exam. So excited to get it done. And they won't even realize why.
Yeah.
But I also think it's just a matter of teachers learning these skills, like cognitive reframing, how does it work, how to reframe a situation, and then just integrating them into the way they're teaching naturally. Because kids and people learn via imitation. We imitate, we copy, we replicate, and then we find out what happened, what went wrong. Bit of a little trial and error. It's called reward prediction error coding. Big fancy word for it, but it basically means we try things and things go wrong, and then our brain says do it differently next time. So when a teacher is like,
so again, kids, you're like validating my whole what could go wrong concept. I think that's what's happening.
Oh yeah, great. Totally. Just, go ahead. I'm giving you science for it. I'm giving you some mad science. Yes. So I mean, basically, the easiest way for teachers to teach these skills is use them in the classroom. If you're standing up and being like, oh, I had a really crap morning today because I spilled my coffee. But then you're like, actually, you know what, class? This morning, my partner said something really nice. So it's been a pretty good morning. If you're showing the kids that and you're doing that over and over again as a part of the way you're teaching, kids will eventually imitate that behavior, and then they'll start doing it without realizing. And suddenly they're all cognitive reframing.
Yeah, the magic of modeling is what we used to call it, in that is like the magic of modeling the behavior that you want to happen, instead of just saying this is what you need to do. It's how are you modeling that inside of your daily activities, with your language and all of that. And so I have an interesting question to kind of hear if you have a soapbox about it, in the line of cognitive reframing. So I have a very deep personal issue with labels. Right. So when a child has a diagnosis and then the child from a very young age is told, you are learning different, you have a special need, you have ADHD, therefore you can't do, you have whatever. That makes me hurt, because then that child is not hearing, like my daughter has dyslexia, but the way we frame it is, here's your superpower. Here are the things that you get from having dyslexia. Here are some of the challenges you face. Here's how we're going to overcome them, right? We frame it in a very specific way. But so often that's not what's happening at all. It's here's what you're going to struggle with for the rest of your life. Like, tell me what you think, sir.
Oh my God. You've really opened up a can of worms here, Doctor. What could not go wrong? What could go wrong? You have opened up a can of Doctor, what could go wrong? Let me get back on my therapy chair here, because I have some thoughts on this one. So I'm strongly of the opinion that most labels in academic situations are limiting more than they're freeing. And things like, learning disorders that are labeled, whether that be dyslexia or other similar ones, or even attention disorders, or even grades, and calling a kid an F student or a D student. Yeah. All those are limiting. And here's why in the brain, right? We have a function of our brain called confirmation bias, where the attention filter in our brain, the reticular activating system and our hypothalamus, constantly scans our environment for evidence that what we already think, our beliefs, is true. So when you tell a kid, hey, you're really bad at writing, guess what they're going to be thinking all day? They're going to be looking for examples where they're bad at writing, or they're bad at maths, or they can't focus. And so you giving them a label is actually just giving them a filter to constantly assess their learning and their education through that filter and confirm it to be true. So you are straight up giving them blinders. You're putting them in a tunnel, right? But when you don't do that, like you said, when you say you've actually got this superpower, or you can do all these other amazing things, or this is you unleash them. It's like, rather than giving them blinder focus, you're giving them this wider vision. So I think labels are horrible, because it's another person putting restrictions on a kid, whether that be a teacher, a psychologist, whatever it is. And they're more often than not, they're restricting rather than freeing.
You know what I love about you is that you bring science to my soapboxes. You totally validate my soapboxes. This is really all about me. This whole situation is just for you to bring science to my soapboxes. I don't know why anybody else is here for this, but it's really just about me. But I agree. And it really is such a big challenge that kiddos face. And when my youngest was first diagnosed with these things, we didn't tell her. We just let her experience life as she experienced life. And then as she got older, she started to kind of notice, it's really hard for me to do this thing, but it seems so very easy for other people. And it became a conversation. And it came up of, if you want to put something specific to it, what it's called is dyslexia. And here's what it means. And we introduced it in that manner and kind of had that conversation, and then took that opportunity to reframe it right then and there. It's like, some people will see it as this. Some people may say you can't do blah, blah, right? We confronted all of the things that she might experience from the very beginning and gave her a different foundation that she could hold it back to. So then when she went to school and someone would say, you have dyslexia, so you can't do, she could come back to her truth, which we helped her build, and say, I do have dyslexia, and that is challenging for me, but here's what I can do. And had to give her those skills to be able to confront those things, which is really hard. And many people, especially in public schools, when these kids are kind of attacked with all of these labels, parents can't always get in front of it. They're just having to deal with it retroactively.
Yeah, they bring it home with them, right? They're like, hey, Jason, why do you look so down? Oh, well, I just got diagnosed with ADHD at school. And I got told I'll never be able to focus and pay attention. And my teacher said I'm useless and distracting their class. As opposed to being like, hey, Jason, you've got this superpower. You can focus on all these different things. You've got so much energy. Like, you are always going to be the one who's able to drive projects, because you're just so energized. But you're right. It's the way we frame things. And too often those labels come with negative connotations about what you can't do as opposed to what you can do.
Yeah. I think we should reframe them as superpowers. That's my whole plan. But let's just do that. I like it.
Yeah. Let's do it. Yeah. Doctor, what could go wrong? It's start a therapy, Chelsea. I'm there for you,
That could be fun. Let's see. Matthew says, confirmation bias. So probably why I believe teaching self-evaluative thought and critical thinking is so important. How to overcome our unbiased and find objective reality truth. Yes. Like, what does it mean? And that's similar to kind of what I was saying about my youngest, is she needed to have an understanding of what her own truth was and her own experience, so that when she was confronted with these other things, she could evaluate it for herself and critically think about it, rather than just accepting what others are saying about her. Yes. Totally. So
I love that so much. So one of my mentors in learning and neuroscience has this phrase, or idea that I love, that I think teachers should take on board, and that I try to. And it's this idea that you should be uncovering learning, not telling kids what to learn. You shouldn't be telling them, hey, this is X, Y, and Z fact. You should uncover an environment where they can discover that for themselves. And this is the exact same thing. It's not, you have dyslexia and this is all the things you can do wrong. It's, hey, here's some information about it. Come up with your own thought, your own model for how that works, and own that.
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh. I was in a conversation the other day with someone who said, we were talking about education and teachers and all of that. And she said, it's not about showing them one path. It's about showing one's path. Like, not here's the path that everybody has to go on, but what is your path? And I was like, I'm writing that down, because that's legit right there.
I just wrote that down right then.
Right? I mean, because that's so true. And I feel like, so much of education, as we've already talked about, and really so much of things, many things, is here's a one way for you to do it in the workplace and education, across all these avenues. But what if we switch that from here's the path you need to take to what is your path that you need to take, instead of one path, what's one's path? And just like the mindset shift that has to come with that statement could just change things. And I think, science.
So yeah, I like it. Like that was a really great reference. Like that's peer reviewed, APA citation. That's right? Straight up.
I mean, it's there somewhere.
You know what's crazy to me though is so much of like the Scandinavian school system operates this way, and we can see it's some of the most effective in the world. They already do this, right? It's like, hey, this is a couple of things you can do. Choose how you want to develop. It's your choice. Yes. It's not our instruction. It's your choice. And then we're over in the Western world being like, you know what? You're going to learn this, and you're going to learn this, and you're going to learn
just like this.
Just like that.
And don't learn it wrong, because if you learn it wrong, then that's a whole different problem. I don't care that you're the answer.
And then we'll label you a bad student. You won't get into the colleges, and you're going to be a failure for life. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And then kids integrate that information, and we wonder why they're so stressed around exam times, because they feel like if they get a D in this exam, their life's over.
Yeah. Can we I have so many thoughts. Okay. We need to do this again, because I just feel like I'm going to write down all my other soapboxes, and we're just going to talk, and you can just validate them scientifically one by one. Can we just plan to do that again? Because,
we can totally do that. I'll be your Dr. Phil, but with real science. I'm happy to do that.
With real science. That's excellent. Okay. Well, I could sit here and talk to you about this for the next 200 hours. But people would probably get bored, and, apparently you have like a job and all those things. So tell people where they can find you, and like where they can find your podcast and all these types of things. 'Cause I find it fascinating, and surely everybody else in the world does too.
Well, all right. The easiest way to find me, I'm on LinkedIn. You can go, I'll jump in the comments somewhere. You can find me there. And then my podcast is just BrainTools Podcast. You can find on Apple, on iTunes, on Spotify, on Podbean, wherever you're at. It'll be there. And follow along if you're interested, if you find it interesting, or reach out, DM me, ask me a question. I love when people say, hey, Sam, like, what's the science behind this? I'm like, oh, yes, I get to talk. I'm needed. I'm useful.
That's awesome. You heard it here. DM Sam and ask him all the questions. And use neuroscience in all of your Google search terms, and do the cognitive reframing. That's all you need. Those are the three things that you need. We just fixed everything.
We just solved the whole problem. Someone give us $1 billion and give us a school system.
And I would Chelsea, like a plaque.
Let's start a school.
Says, Dr. Okay, that sounds like a great plan. Soapboxes in science. That's what we could call it. Soapboxes in science learning environment.
That sounds like a talk show, right? I'm down for that. The Soapboxes in Science talk show.
Oh, things are happening. I'm gonna DM you with other questions about our next Soapboxes in Science conversation, because that sounds fantastic.
Watch this space, people. Watch this space.
It's going to be great. Well, thank you so much for hanging out, Sam. Really, this has been like one of my favorite conversations. I know that people pretend that they don't like brain science, but they really do. So I know that everybody participated in this, learned something fantastic, whether they will admit it or not. Just embrace your inner nerd. It's totally fine. It's way cooler that way anyway.
It's cool. Nerds rule the world, guys. Tech companies are the big companies. They really do.
That's so true. So I use Restream to stream all my stuff across all the different platforms, because I'm not nerdy enough to know how to do that without having a platform that does it. So check that out. Otherwise, you can if you catch us on the replay, jump in the comments and still follow Sam and do all those types of things. And then if you catch it on the podcast, we'll put the links to all of Sam's stuff inside of the podcast as well. So thank you guys for hanging out with us. And I hope you learned something, and throw neuroscience in all of your search terms. You're welcome. We will see you guys next time.
Easy. Thanks so much for having me. See everyone next